Hello, everybody. Just going to present here. So, today we're talking about defining appropriate quantities for the purpose of descriptive modeling and why that's important. The learning progression of how we got here is first we need to determine units of measure. So that's the lesson that goes before determining the appropriate quantities, because if you don't know the actual units of measure, then it's going to be impossible to determine the appropriate quantities. So our deconstructed standard here is define, and then that's what we're going to be doing. And then the content is define the appropriate quantities for the purpose of descriptive modeling. And descriptive modeling is just the real world application of those quantities, because eventually we're going to turn this all into equations and we're going to be able to solve some pretty cool problems. So now we're getting into the meat of our lesson here and the type of assessment strategy we're going to use for the lesson. We're going to be using the clarifying, sharing, and understanding learning intention strategy. And our specific learning intention is I will be able to define appropriate quantities for the purpose of descriptive modeling. And the whole reason we chose the assessment strategy is it works well into our intention for the lesson. So our intention is defining the appropriate quantities, but sort of the big idea of why we want to do that is so we know how to applicate the quantities and the units in the real world. So we're going to start with a discussion, and that's our example for the assessment strategy. So that's sort of our formative assessment example. We're going to start with having students in small groups, and they're going to share with each other why they think defining appropriate quantities is important. And then we're going to come together as a whole group, and I will sort of formulate and guide the discussion in a certain way. If I feel like maybe some of the groups had trouble getting on track and coming up with reasons why that would be important. So one of the reasons why it might be important would be if I'm designing a swimming pool and I want to define how much water I'm going to put in that pool. First of all, using the learning progression method, in the previous lesson we talk about units of measure, I would need to have a unit of measure that can measure volume and weight of some kind of entity. In this case, it's water. So would I want to use ounces? Would I want to use liters? Would I want to use gallons? In this case, I'd probably want to use gallons, just because it's a larger unit than ounces. If I use ounces, it's going to be too big of a number and it's going to overcomplicate the matter. So that's just one example of why we would choose that unit of measure to determine the appropriate quantity. So that's the lesson. It's pretty simple. I think it's important to keep that simple so our students don't get too sidetracked, because the whole idea is for them to learn. And I think if you overcomplicate things, the author in our textbook talks about rubrics and how rubrics basically are nothing more than a success criteria. That's not our goal. Our goal is for students to be able to transfer their knowledge here into the real world and see the importance in doing so. So thank you for coming to this lesson. That will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.